Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Thursday, March the 5th, 2026. Today, the Sun in Pisces makes a trine to Jupiter in Cancer. So that sounds good, sounds a pleasant aspect, and it is, I think, the main aspect of the day. And I think it's something that I want to look at. Now, just because it's a trine, just because it involves Jupiter, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to all be sweetness and light. Perhaps this Sun trine Jupiter has a dark side, and that is something I want to look at the end of a video. But first of all, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Thursday, March the 5th. And here is the chart for today, set for noon New York time. So as far as what's going on, we have the moon in Libra, moon sort of solidly in Libra at sort of 11 Libra. So the Libran moon, it doesn't actually do a great deal. I mean, it's made the opposition to Saturn and Neptune, and after that, it does make a square to Jupiter, in the end. So there's a square to Jupiter, right at the end of the day, certainly sort of New York time. So that moon in Libra, it's getting ready to move into the Vir Combustor. So Vir Combustor, that part of the sky between 15 Libra and 15 Scorpio. So, it's not there yet. In fact, if you're not in the Americas, if you're in Eurasia, Australasia, the moon will not go into the Vir Combustor at any stage in the day. If you're in the Americas, and this evening, the moon will start to move into the Vir Combustor. Now, moon in the Vir Combustor is, of course, something that happens, pretty regularly, of course. For a whole sign, 50, well, at least half of Libra, half of Scorpio. But maybe with all of this tension in the Middle East, the moon in the Vir Combustor will, really manifest in quite a dramatic way. But I can talk about that tomorrow on Friday. So aside from that, Mars is making a semi-sextile to Saturn. So Mars semi-sextile Saturn, it could be potentially a difficult aspect. I mean, Mars and Saturn, that is a pairing that one could associate with death and destruction and frustration. Okay, death and destruction in terms of what is happening in the world, perhaps frustration on a sort of a more personal level in our everyday lives. And so, how does one, deal with this? Mars in Pisces plays Saturn in Aries. It doesn't seem to be very assertive, and you can see that Mars in Pisces, you can imagine sort of energy going all over the place, not quite getting there, and Saturn getting rather frustrated about it. So that's what's going on. I mean, that's one aspect to consider. Then there is the Sun making a trine to Jupiter. Now, I'm going to be talking about this trine a lot more at the end of the video, but really, the Sun trine Jupiter is the most important aspect of the day, and it sort of takes place with Sun at 15 Pisces and Jupiter 15 Cancer, and it certainly can be fortunate. The Sun is in Pisces. Sun is in a sign ruled by Jupiter, so that does create the possibility of good luck, of things possibly going our way. But it can also be a moment where something gets revealed for better or for worse. It's reached a certain stage. How far can it go? Sun trine Jupiter, that's a point where it all happens. And so it's not necessarily always, going to be, a great thing. And one thing about this Sun trine Jupiter is that it's midpoint. So if you've got the Sun at 15 degrees Pisces and you've got Jupiter at 15 degrees Aries, the midpoint between the two is going to be 15 degrees Taurus. Now, 15 degrees Taurus is 45 degrees from the Aries point. So effectively, you've got Aries on the Mars-Jupiter midpoint. Now, that might sound great, Aries on the Mars-Jupiter midpoint. Aries. Let me repeat that. Aries on the Sun-Jupiter midpoint. It might sound, very exciting, things happening, energy. But, where is that energy going? And who is it that is trying to be energetic? When we've got a war going on in the Middle East, and the Middle East is not the only place where there's a war going on. Kind of everyone's lost interest in Ukraine. God, I've lost interest in Ukraine. I mean, I was looking at Ukraine all the time. I used to be obsessed about Ukraine. I haven't really looked at what's going on. I mean, that's kind of a bit careless of me. But that's another place where things can happen. But it may be somewhere we haven't really thought about. And so that's this Sun trine Jupiter, with Aries on aspecting the Sun Jupiter midpoint, is not an aspect that we should necessarily underestimate. And I will be talking about that at the end of the video. So that is the picture set for if we set the chart for New York. If we set the chart for Sydney, Australia, at noon in Sydney, as a representative of Australia and East Asia, the moon is earlier in the sign at noon. The moon is at 3 degrees Libra, so really early in the morning, before dawn, I think, certainly before 6 o'clock. I don't know when the sun rises in Australia or New Zealand, but really early. The moon will be in late Virgo, but I think that for the bulk of the day, the moon will be in Libra. It will be making an opposition to Saturn. So at the beginning of the day, if you are in Australasia, things might not move. Things might be a bit frustrating, but then, the moon makes an opposition to Neptune, so that's sort of more frustration. But then the moon makes a trine to Pluto, and that might mean that things can finally start to move. It might take a bit of effort. It might take a bit of focus, but it shouldn't be such a bad day. And then there is the heliocentric view, putting the sun at the center of the solar system. So what we have is a couple of micro aspects. So when I say a micro aspect, the kind of aspect what one doesn't normally pick up on. So the Earth is making a micro aspect to Uranus. Now, what do I mean by a micro aspect? I'm really talking about a multiple of 15. So, there's Uranus and there's the Earth. So that means that Uranus and the Earth are, I think, approximately 105 degrees apart. So 105. Well, what it is a 24th harmonic conjunction. And I think we've got another 24th harmonic conjunction between Pluto and Venus. So let me just show you what that means. Let me just create the 24th harmonic of that chart. So we'll give it. So if we put up the 24th harmonic, we should see the Earth reasonably close to a conjunction of Uranus. I know that seems a long way off, 12 degrees, and that Venus and Pluto is closer, but 12 degrees in a harmonic chart, you can use wider orbs. So you can see that the Earth is closing in on Uranus, and because we have to multiply everything by 24. So although it seems to be a long way apart, 12 degrees apart, because it's a 24th harmonic, it will only take 12 hours to make that. So the Earth is applying to a 24th harmonic conjunction of Uranus, and Venus is applying to a 24th harmonic conjunction of Pluto. So, over the next day, as that, well, certainly that Earth-Uranus 24th harmonic conjunction is concerned, that will stir things up, and that perhaps links with a geocentric Sun trine Jupiter. I'm just feeling that Sun trine Jupiter may be difficult. It may be quite dangerous, and I do think that links with the 24th harmonic of the heliocentric chart. And also there's Venus Pluto. This 24th harmonic conjunction between Venus and Pluto might say something about relationships and power, and it might be something happening under the surface, people trying to assert themselves, people trying to get noticed. And it is a bit difficult, but I think that, there is certainly a way through. So now I want to look at the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Thursday, March the 5th, 2026. Aries, you might feel at times rather frustrated. There are things that you would certainly like to do. You'd like to get them off the ground, but it could be hard work. There's just something bothering you, something getting in your way that's difficult to put your finger on. It should be fine. It should be okay, but somehow it's not okay. And perhaps you have to make a conscious effort to really start to understand what is going on. I mean, it's easy to blame other people if things aren't going to plan. If you feel frustrated, you feel annoyed that things are moving slowly, then who is responsible? You might want to play the blame game. But before considering what other people's role in the whole thing is, consider, what you might be doing. It might be something to do with, the way you feel. And your emotions are, arguably stronger than usual. And you are moving in, many different directions. You're having, powerful feelings, but at the same time, you want to be in control. Yeah, you do want to be in control. I mean, Saturn is in Aries now, and you're perhaps really starting to get used to the fact that Saturn is in Aries. I know that Saturn's been in Aries for the last 3 weeks, and went into Aries on February the 14th, but still, you're still getting used to it. And right now, there is just something not quite working, and I think that you've just got to be honest with yourself about what it might be, and while you're at it, do spend some time thinking about what other people are doing, not because you're trying to blame anyone, but it just could be that if you are feeling frustrated because you can't do anything, or at least you can't do as much as you'd like to do, just maybe you need to concentrate on something else. Concentrate on what other people are doing and what other people are trying to do, what they are trying to achieve. They may not be entirely successful. Maybe you can help. Maybe if you can't sort yourself out, maybe you can sort someone else out, and that might allow you to be, more positive. And like yesterday, Aries, I think that you are pretty charismatic in your own way. You are someone who can have an influence. You can be noticed, and if you want to get someone's attention, it shouldn't be a problem. And you can even move other people slowly in the direction you want them to go in. So if you want someone to come to the right conclusion, a conclusion that you are happy with, you can just assert yourself in in very subtle ways. So you probably have more control than you realize, but you just don't feel that you have to be absolutely in the center of things. And also just consider your own feelings and how your feelings might be slowing you down, and there might be something that you don't want to face, and because you don't want to face it, that might slow you down. But I don't want to over dramatize anything. It can be a reasonably successful day, but yeah, things might take more time than expected. And at the same, though, you shouldn't give up on anything. Things are possible, and you should just think about what is the reason why things might be slow, and it might be something to do with you and your perceptions rather than anything that anyone else is doing or not doing. Taurus. There is something just in the air which is not entirely to your liking. I mean, it's not 100% great. You just have a bad feeling, and it's certainly nothing to worry about. I mean, it's nothing personal, nothing that's going to necessarily mess your day up. But you are cautious, and you feel that things could go wrong, and you're also slightly worried about other people's motivations, what people are planning. Maybe you have quite a suspicious nature at the moment. There's nothing wrong with having a suspicious nature. People can do anything and they can think anything, and their motivations may be very difficult to understand, but you just know that things are not quite as simple and straightforward as they should be. And with that attitude, you could say, well, you're being cautious. And if you're cautious and methodical, then I do think that you're going to be able to deal with whatever challenges you have to face over the course of the day. And yeah, being methodical, I think that is really important. You have to do things properly. That's what it's all about. There is a way of doing things. It takes time. It takes effort. It might be boring, but that is almost certainly the right approach. And you mustn't change things too quickly. You might be tempted to make a change, maybe a big change, but you make a big change, and straight away you have to balance it out. And if you go too quickly, you can't balance it out, and you could cause a lot of trouble. So incremental changes is what you should be looking for. Small changes, and then you balance those changes. You balance one change with another change, and you slowly move forward, and you don't allow your own worries, and it might feel that there are things to worry about, as I said at the beginning of this piece, on your sign, but just don't necessarily take things to heart. It's not necessarily that serious. And if we're talking about worries, I mean, look at Venus. I mean, Venus is your ruler, and it's on Skeet. Skeet is a fixed star associated, as I keep saying, with accidents and disasters and so forth. I mean, it's a star that's just easy to spot. Maybe I talk about Skeet too much, but with Venus on Skeet, that just may say something about your pessimism. You can just see how things could go wrong. Doesn't mean to say things will go wrong, but you might feel that they could go wrong. Although it does go without saying, you should be careful with water with Venus on Skeet. Whether it's plumbing, water in the house, it's not a good day for going travelling on small boats. It could go wrong. I mean, if you're taking a commercial ferry, that's probably fine. But on small boats, anything to do with I don't know, amateurish water, plumbing, small boats, anything like that should definitely be avoided. And maybe also, Taurus, you don't really want to commit yourself right now. Not when Venus is getting ready to change sign. Venus is only on the verge of moving into Aries, and that is a big change. Venus, moving out of Pisces, a water sign, into a fire sign, that brings new opportunities, new challenges. Venus moving into Aries, sounds problematic on the surface because it's moving into the sign of its detriment, but it's in mutual. It's going to it'll be in mutual reception by exaltation of the sun. So I don't think it's so bad, Venus moving into Aries, and I will be talking about that in my video for tomorrow. So. Don't allow yourself to be overly negative. Don't worry too much about the future, and just make sure that everything is all in order. And then I think it should be a reasonable Thursday. Gemini. Moon is in Libra. It's not doing a huge amount in Libra. Maybe that's a good thing. So Libra is an air sign, and it's therefore a sign that just has a natural affinity with Gemini, with your own sign. And so with the moon in Libra, you don't have much to worry about. I don't think there's much opposition. What happens is the moon moves into Libra. It's already it's okay. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, it moved into Libra very early this morning. But if you're in other parts of the world, the Americas, Europe, it's been in Libra for a bit of time. And the moon does make an opposition to Saturn, opposition to Neptune. But I think for most of us, that opposition to Saturn and Neptune is something from the past. Okay, albeit the recent past. And so moon not doing a great deal, and that's good, because it might mean, Gemini, that there isn't a great deal of interference. If you want to do something, do it. Within reason, provided it's not dangerous. And think about how you want to enjoy yourself, how you want to do something that you regard as being an essential part of your creative self-expression. And I think you can do it without having to worry too much about outside opinions, criticism. Don't worry about it. Though I do think, Gemini, that your ability to relate to other people is actually pretty good. Particularly people that you don't necessarily know very well. If you want to just engage in some sort of idle conversation, then I think you'll know what to say, and perhaps you can draw some new people into your orbit, and that's something to something to look forward to. And at the same time, there may be a couple of people who could do you got a lot of good, who could really get things moving for you. One aspect we do have today is a trine between the Sun and Jupiter, and this Sun trine Jupiter, it may not be spectacular, but it could certainly be helpful, particularly in a financial or material sense. It's perhaps about other people who have authority, who have responsibility, and if you can find the right way of relating to them, there are many ways in which they could help you out and perhaps give you tips, advice, or maybe they got something to offer. So don't underestimate people. If you know someone, maybe they can put you in touch with someone else, etc., etc. In fact, it is a good day for making contacts, and contacts which could turn out to be very useful. Cancer. I think, Cancer, that you're not really inclined to take risks. You don't want to take risks. You don't want to put yourself out, do anything controversial, where something might go wrong. Well, you don't want anything to go wrong, of course. So, as far as you're concerned, the best approach might be to play it safe. And if you keep a low profile, Cancer, then I'm confident that the day can just drift by without anything too problematic happening. And in fact, it might be a day when when things actually could be slowly moving. Again, there's no need to push it. I mean, we do have a trine between the Sun and Jupiter, and Jupiter is your ruler. Of course, Jupiter is moving through Cancer. It's moving retrograde through Cancer, but it is really getting ready to go stationary. I mean, it's today's the 5th, so in less than a week, Jupiter comes to a standstill in preparation for its forward motion. And now that the Sun is trine Jupiter, I think that's potentially an opportunity. Something is happening, and it may be happening at quite a high level. You may be starting to realize that an opportunity exists, and you have been sort of sorting through your ideas and your overall sense of direction, and it has at times been rather slow, but now, Cancer, it is beginning to come together, and you're seeing that there are things out there which you can very much take advantage of, but in your own way. You don't have to follow anyone else's lead, and it just might be just you and the universe. And the universe could well, with the Sun trine Jupiter, be speaking to you. It's got something to say. You understand how it's all coming together, and that might give you the impetus to take sort of constructive action, at a later stage. I mean, probably not today. I think that today you want to sort of take it easy and not take any risks, not do anything dramatic. But that will change, and perhaps you can make some important decisions over the course of the day, which, as I've already suggested, you don't have to act on, at least in the short term. Leo, you are feeling slightly tense. You feel that something should be happening, that the current situation, just isn't quite good enough, and that might be your first impression. And you kind of you can't see the opportunity, and because you can't see the opportunity, you just stick with it, whatever it is you're sticking with. You're maybe focusing on the things that are frustrating you, the things that are getting you down. They're there and they won't go away, and they're holding you up. And that might be how you come into the day. And there is some possibility that you just can't see any other option. But I'm telling you, there's a trine between the Sun and Jupiter. This trine between the Sun and Jupiter, that is the main aspect of the day. And I think it's an important aspect. And of course, it involves the Sun. And the Sun is your ruler. So if the Sun is trine Jupiter, and Jupiter's in Cancer, the sign of its exaltation, that means that you can be lucky. Something can really go your way, but it's not going to be obvious. It's not like something just amazing happening out of the blue. And it happens, bright lights, lots of arrows. You can see it. It's obvious. Here's the advantage. Here's the opportunity. It's all packaged nicely for you. No, it's not like that. It's more low profile. It's not obvious, and it's not something that you have to go out of your way to find. I mean, it's with you, actually. It really is with you, and that might actually be the overall message of Jupiter in Cancer. Jupiter has been in Cancer for some time. Jupiter will stay in Cancer, I think, until July of next year. So, Jupiter is, of course, in the sign before Leo, and it's a sign which is introspective, and it's kind of saying that the luck is hidden. The luck is not right in front of you, but it's not it's not highlighted. But the question is, where is it hidden? I mean, it's hidden almost in your own unconscious, in your own mind, in your own heart. And so if you can find that hidden luck, then you can really start to take advantage of it. And the Sun making trine to Jupiter today, highlights that Jupiter in Cancer. And it might well be, Leo, about your inner experiences. It's not what you're doing in the outside world, in your own world, which is kind of wonderful and vivid at the moment. And it might just be a realization, an understanding that something is possible, and it's so unique to you. Once you get it, then you can't unget it. It's there, and you have a realization. And after that, well, it's up to you to find a way of putting it into action. I think that over the next couple of days, things will become clearer. Tomorrow we have Venus moving into Aries. That's great, Venus moving into Aries, because when Venus moves into Aries, it's in mutual reception to the Sun, because Aries is the exaltation sign of the Sun. Sun is in Pisces, the exaltation sign of the Venus. And so maybe you'll be able to take full advantage of that Sun trine Jupiter once Venus moves into Aries, and I'll be talking about that in my horoscope for tomorrow, Friday. Virgo, you're capable of being friendly and gregarious and being able to mix with lots of different people. That capability is there. That doesn't mean to say that you're necessarily going to use that capability. You might feel that you can't be bothered, that you don't want to take the risk, that it's just best to keep a low profile. But I think you should give it some effort, particularly while Venus is still in Pisces, still in your opposite sign. It's not going to be in Pisces for much longer. It's about to move into Aries, and so while you have got these 4 planets in Pisces, these 4 planets in your opposite sign, plus the North Node, I think it is a time, Virgo, to really try to concentrate on other people and to think about what they can do for you. And that does mean perhaps taking the initiative, trying to be warm and friendly. It might not be the first thing that comes to mind, but I do think that if you make the effort, you will be rewarded, and you're going to be helped by the fact that the Sun is making a trine to Jupiter. I think that this trine between the Sun and Jupiter, is great. I mean, you've got the Sun in Pisces, your opposite sign. You've got Jupiter in Cancer. Jupiter, don't forget, is ruler of Pisces. So Jupiter in the Virgoan chart does have a connection with relationships. And I think that with the Sun trine Jupiter, Virgo, you can really get things moving on a social level. Perhaps there's some new group of people you want to interact with. You want to perhaps have a change of scene. And if you do have a change of scene, meeting new people, I think that you can benefit from them, and you can relate to them, very well. So don't ask too many questions. You might wonder, why are you doing it? Why are you making the effort? Is it worth the effort? But if you can just be natural, see what people have got to offer, then I think that you could sort of end the day sort of being pleasantly surprised with how things develop. Libra. The moon continues moving through your sign. It's not doing a great deal there. It's already made the opposition to Saturn and Neptune, and it is moving slowly towards an aspect with Jupiter. I mean, I say slowly, not necessarily because the moon is moving slowly, but that Moon-Jupiter square is not going to be until tomorrow, unless you're in the Americas. It will be exact, perhaps this evening. So, because the moon is not doing a great deal, that might mean that you have a fair amount of freedom. You've got the moon in Libra, you've got the advantages of the moon in Libra, but there's not necessarily anything that you absolutely have to do. So, if you want to do nothing, or just enjoy yourself, soak up the vibes, then feel free. And at the same time, Venus is getting ready to move into Aries. Venus is in the last degree of Pisces. It's actually quite close to Skeet. And so with Venus in that condition, maybe you shouldn't do anything. I mean, the fixed star Skeet is associated with bad things, accidents, disasters, shipwrecks, the usual list. And so why should you put yourself out unless there's some definite benefit there? Because if the more action you take, the more stuff you do, the greater the risk. I mean, I certainly don't want to suggest that there is any real risk, but I have to point that out, don't I? That Venus is close to Skeet. That last degree of Pisces, can be dangerous. I mean, I'm sure it won't be dangerous, but I think that it's going to be important, Libra, that as far as is possible, you do things properly. You do things by the book. You don't sort of make things up or think that you know better than the instruction manual or standard advice. So find out what the accepted procedure is. Do it properly. If you can't do it properly, and if you don't understand how to do it properly, then possibly you shouldn't just do it at all. And there is a case, in fact, Libra, for not initiating anything, to be sort of doing anything controversial or safety critical, while Venus is in this condition, while it's sort of moving from one sign to another. So things could be a bit delicate today, and so don't feel that you have to take any risks. It's not necessary, and maybe you've got it all sorted out and you're ready for the change, and so it might just be a question, Libra, of quietly waiting for things to develop further. Now, the moon squared Jupiter. Now, this square between moon and Jupiter, you might start to feel it, towards the end of the day. Especially if you're in the Americas. If not, then you'll feel it tomorrow. Now, the moon in Libra, making a square to Jupiter in Cancer. I think that it could be, quite a dynamic and useful aspect, and it perhaps allows you to think about, what needs to be done, what you would like to organize, what you'd like to get off the ground, and you you might see the opportunity, and it's not about having to do anything dramatic. It's about understanding what you can do, what is possible, and maybe that's what today is all about. Working out what your resources are, what your capacities are, what your knowledge, talent, all that kind of stuff, what you've got to bring to bear, and then you can start to create a plan. But it's always important to just work with possibilities. You don't want to be speculative or sort of drift off onto some random fantasy. Just focus on what you can do, and try your hardest. And this is not just about today, it's into tomorrow as well, because the moon will be in Libra tomorrow as well. But of course tomorrow, Venus will be in Aries, and that is an important change. And I think there are certainly advantages of Venus being in Aries, but I'll tell you about those when I do my reading for tomorrow, Friday. Scorpio. There may be moments today, Scorpio, when you do feel a little bit frustrated. And the reason I'm saying that is because there is a semi-sextile between Mars and Saturn. So Mars in Pisces is a semi-sextile Saturn in Aries. So I would have said that Mars in Pisces, perhaps represents what you're trying to do, and you want to be free. You want to perhaps enjoy yourself, and you're starting to realize what is possible, and you're starting to see that quite a lot of things are possible. But then you run into Saturn, at least this semi-sextile. Now, a semi-sextile aspect, it's not like a square or an opposition or perhaps a conjunction where you've got these sort of competing forces that might be sort of battling it out. A semi-sextile is more about integration. It's rather like the quincunx. There are definite similarities between those two aspects. And so you are kind of trying to integrate the Saturn energy. And this Saturn energy, or Saturn is in Aries, and it's about just having to sort things out, having the discipline to sort things out, and to create order, and to be disciplined. And these are things that at some level you just don't want to do. I mean, it might feel, Scorpio, that discipline and creativity are completely at odds with one another. You see that creativity is a free-flowing process that shouldn't have any structure. You go where you want to go. But honestly, if there is no structure, then whatever you're involved with, whatever creative endeavors you're focusing on, they're not going to get anywhere. And maybe you're starting to realize this with Mars sextile Saturn. So I think that the Mars sextile Saturn aspect could actually be very fortunate, because it just forces you to get yourself together. If something is important to you, if you enjoy it also, then you want to make it work, and you can only make it work by having a certain level of discipline. And that is the constructive way of using this aspect. And I think you'll be helped by other people's attitudes. Don't make assumptions about people. You might think that people are useless, that you can't get through to them, but that's not true. I think that if you try to talk to people, if you try to explain your viewpoint, I think that they're going to understand. And I think, Scorpio, in many cases, you're going to be quite good at getting people to change their minds about something that is important to you. You might not think that's possible. People might seem very stubborn, but there's always a way. And so you can use the facts. Maybe you can be a little bit manipulative, and in that way you can bring people around to your way of thinking. Sagittarius. The big aspect today is Sun trine Jupiter. I mean, I'm going to be talking about Sun trine Jupiter in some detail at the end of this video, but of course, it's relevant to you. I mean, Jupiter is your ruler. Sun is trine Jupiter, and I think that you very much benefit from this. It's a high energy aspect, although it is in water signs. So it's not like it's in fire signs. It doesn't have the dynamic fieriness as if it was in, I don't know, in Aries or Aries and Sagittarius. No, it's obviously you've got the sun in Pisces, Jupiter in Cancer. So it is more subtle and more sort of understated in those signs, but it doesn't mean that it's not working. I think it really is working. And it perhaps reminds you that, Jupiter's in Cancer. Jupiter is your ruler. It's been in Cancer since last summer. It's going to be in Cancer until, I think, July. I think it's July, or is it June? I think it's July. And so with Sun trine, with this Sun trine Jupiter, it is maybe about bringing down to earth some of your power, and your power has been developing since the summer. It's about your intensity, taking yourself seriously, and making sure that you're heard, and also not wasting your time on trivia. And there is an intensity to Jupiter in Cancer. And so when the Sun makes a trine to Jupiter, you can make something real. You can indeed bring it down to earth, and in the process you can have a dramatic impact. The question is, how dramatic? You could take things too far if you really push it. I mean, you want to shake things up. You want to perhaps get people to pay attention to you, but you don't want to take things. You don't want to take things to extremes. But it's also important that you feel you have freedom. If you don't have freedom, or if you feel that you don't have freedom, there could be a problem. And it's like what I was saying yesterday, Sagittarius. I think yesterday I suggested that you might be more sort of accident prone than usual, and I repeat the warning. If you underestimate your physical environment, or if you get annoyed with physical objects, or if you're just in too much of a hurry because there's something bothering you, then you could come a cropper. But I think that would be unnecessary. What you're trying to do is make an impact, but make an impact that doesn't cause any damage. And I think that Sagittarius, you do have a great opportunity here to really sort of bring everything down to earth and really feel your own power. Capricorn. Mars is making a semi-sextile to Saturn. I mean, it's a minor aspect, isn't it? A semi-sextile, 30 degrees. So, what is the relationship between Mars and Saturn? So Mars could be a problem here, because, Saturn is you. Mars is just something bothering you, something maybe getting in your way, or it could be some kind of irritation. I mean, it could be an irritation. What kind of irritation? It might be something you hear, some piece of information, something someone says to you. You don't want to know. It disrupts your flow. It doesn't seem relevant, but it is relevant. If something bothers you, then it bothers you for a reason. If something was completely irrelevant, really didn't matter, it wouldn't bother you. So if something does bother you, then take it seriously. Find out what it's about. And that might mean you have to stir yourself into action. I don't think you really want to stir yourself into action. I think that in many respects you would like to stay put. But yeah, that might not be an option. And also with Mars semi-sextile Saturn, it could be that traveling is a pain. I'm not talking about long distance traveling, short distance traveling, going from place to place. Perhaps you're commuting. I mean, it could be something like traffic or car problems or public transport being delayed. So if you are traveling and you're reliant on any form of transport, then allow extra time, or consider the possibility that you don't need to make the journey. I mean, don't make unnecessary journeys. I think that would well, obviously it would be unnecessary. So don't go somewhere if you don't have to, because why give yourself aggravation when you just don't need it. And another aspect we've got Moon square Jupiter. Now that Moon square Jupiter may not be active until tomorrow. Even if you're in the Americas, it might not be a thing until this evening. But Moon square Jupiter may be about how you negotiate your steps forward, whatever those steps forward are, wherever you're trying to go. And it just might seem that something or somebody is in your way. It's something you don't want to take into account, but you have to take into account. So it's a similar picture. You'd like everything to be straightforward today, Capricorn. You don't want to be bothered. You don't want to be disturbed. You don't really want to be challenged. But sometimes it is necessary to be challenged because it's just something you haven't considered. And if you do consider it, then you're going to be in a better position to be sort of happy, accomplished, and successful. In other words, Capricorn, it's important to have an open mind. Aquarius. Moon is in Libra. Moon is not doing a great deal in Libra. It's just staying there. And Libra is an air sign. So, if you're an Aquarius having a moon in Libra, all things being equal, that's not so bad. It allows you to move from place to place. I mean, at least in your mind, one concept, another concept, different ideas, different possibilities. Maybe you can just float free and not have to explain yourself. I mean, why should you have to explain yourself? And play with different ideas, without feeling any obligation to do anything about it. You can play with ideas, you can drop ideas, and you absolutely you don't have to make commitments, and you might not need to worry about anyone else. But I think that would mean that you would or could be missing out on something. The Sun is making a trine to Jupiter. I mean, Sun trine Jupiter for you, Aquarius, could be a good aspect, but it's an aspect that might have to be shared. It might say something about what another person is doing or planning or what they have to offer. And it could be about another person's generosity or their talents, their abilities, something they're prepared to contribute. So do think about other people. Think about what people are doing. And it's very important, Aquarius, to give everyone a chance, because you don't know until you see what someone is doing. You see what someone is offering. So that gives an impression of a day when you should be looking for freedom, but it's not all about freedom. You can be serious if you want to be. And if you want to talk about serious subjects, serious possibilities, then you can. And you can also think about restrictions. And, it's always important to be aware of restrictions. There are some things we just can't do, maybe because it's illegal, or because we don't have the abilities, or, we might have to deal with certain legal realities. So anything like that, where we are talking about maybe governments, legality, code, laws, anything like that, Aquarius, I think you're going to be very good at that, and you may be in a position where you can quote actual laws, and you don't have to be a lawyer to do that. You just know what can be done, and that knowledge is perhaps something you can share. Perhaps you tell someone the way it is, and they accept that you're right, that you know best. Pisces, Sun trine Jupiter. Sun in Pisces, Jupiter in Cancer. Two planets that are working very well for you. It is very much the Pisces season. The sun is right in the middle of Pisces, 15 degrees Pisces. So it's kind of as Pisces as it can get. And the sun is ruled by Jupiter, because Jupiter rules Pisces. Jupiter is in Cancer. Jupiter's exalted in Cancer. So, that Sun trine Jupiter really does, I think, work very well for you. And it is about you just feeling good about yourself. I mean, you should feel good about yourself. You can, be aware of, all the things that you can do. And it might be, Pisces, that there are things that you have done in the past and you'd sort of forgotten about them. And now you can see what you really were doing, and past efforts can start to be realized in the present. I'm kind of borrowing a bit from sort of Vedic astrology, because in Vedic astrology, the fifth house is the house of past life credit, Purva Punya, and Jupiter in Cancer is in your fifth house. I probably shouldn't sort of mess around with Western and Eastern astrology, but there is a sense that with the fifth house, it's a fortunate house, and perhaps it is in Vedic astrology, it is a Purva Punya house. You get the credit for something you've done in the past, and perhaps with the Sun trine Jupiter, there was something working for you, or something that can work for you. You put in the effort, and now you can see the real benefits, and it can be really, really obvious to you, and you don't have to try too hard. I think that is important today. Don't push it. There's no need to push it. I mean, if you do push it, then things could go wrong. If you're in too much of a hurry, you might just create a situation that ends up as being unfortunate. Again, because you're pushing too hard. It's not a day for pushing too hard. Sun trine Jupiter is an aspect which, it's an aspect which is very natural. It's just easy. If something is easy, then it's the right thing for you to do. If there's any resistance, then maybe you should try a different approach. You don't want to have to worry about that. So just maybe you should go for the line of least resistance. I mean, you're not supposed to say that, the line of least resistance, because that kind of suggests that it's kind of a backward moving thing. You associate the line of least resistance with the South Node. I'm not talking about the South Node. I'm talking about you. And if it's easy, then just go for it and enjoy the day. And that's it. Those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now it's time to switch to the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Thursday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 18, illness. Now, it's not as bad as it sounds. illness is the way Greg Winkup, in his version of the I Ching, that's how he described it. The Wilhelm translation calls it work on what has been spoilt. So if we think about illness, we're not talking about something that can't be cured. There is very much the implication here that it can be cured. Something is wrong. Something has been spoiled. Another image with this hexagram is a can of worms, something that has got rotten and it's decayed and it's full of worms, and it needs to be cleaned out, and it needs to be fixed. And we have a moving line, and the image here is of the son dealing with the problems of the father, the problems that the father has created. So we might be dealing with things which we are not necessarily responsible for. It's just something that's been done in the past. And we might have a situation where people have got used to doing things. We had a tradition. Things were always done like this in the past. People got used to it. They couldn't think about any other way of acting. It just carried on. But it was the wrong approach, or maybe it was right to begin with, but it just stopped working. It fell into decay, but people carried on with it. And now it's not doing anyone any good at all. And so we have an opportunity now to look at the past. What went wrong in the past? Maybe we're responsible, but probably not. Someone else set something up. It's not working anymore. We can fix it, and we can deal with the problem. And if there is a problem, and there might be a problem, the key thing is, with that first line moving, to start to address it as soon as possible, as quickly as possible. And on a more practical level, you've always got to think about things in a sort of literal way. One of the images is of a son looking after the father, maybe a younger person looking after an older person, someone who is sick. Perhaps there is something that one can do. So if there are sick people, maybe that's something we can do. But it's not necessarily about sickness. And the Wilhelm translation doesn't talk about sickness. It just talks about working on what has been spoilt, and and that's something that we can do. It's been spoilt in the past, and in the present we can deal with the thing. And bottom line moves. That means that we move to a second hexagram, and the hexagram we move to is hexagram number 26. I mean, it's not a very dynamic or interesting hexagram, at least I don't find it interesting, but the taming power of the great is indicating that it's just something needs to be brought under control. And maybe this links with the previous hexagram of illness, or working on what has been spoilt, that we need to bring something under control. Maybe something in the past has got out of control, and now we need to deal with it. And we don't want to take things too far. I mean, that's the important point of taming power of the great. There is perhaps a certain risk of exaggeration. We want to exaggerate it. We want to take something a long way, but it's not a good idea. We need to just take it one step at a time, and not move too far beyond the situation. And I want to finish by looking at the trine aspect between the Sun and Jupiter. So here is the chart for this aspect. So here it is. Where's Sun trine Jupiter? Got it somewhere. Here it is. Sun trine Jupiter. This is the precise moment at which the Sun is trine Jupiter, set for London. There's no reason why it's set for London. I just did set it for London because it's convenient. And so we've got the Sun at 1508 Pisces and Jupiter at 1508 Cancer. So when we think about Sun trine Jupiter, we have a lot of positive associations, I think. Jupiter, we see this as a fortunate planet, and the sun perhaps represents ourselves and whatever it is we're trying to be, and Jupiter can give us plenty of luck. And Jupiter is a lucky planet, and it can make things happen for us. And in this case, you've got the sun in Pisces. So the sun in Pisces, that is a sign ruled by Jupiter. So Jupiter ruling the sun, that to my mind, does look pretty good. And on a personal level, on an individual level, we can really get things moving. And maybe that's going to be our experience, over the course of the next day or two. Now, I don't want to sort of fall into the trap, which I sometimes do, of just focusing on the exact aspect. Yes, today the aspect is exact. Sun is exactly trine Jupiter, but there is the question of orb. I mean, I like to use quite tight orbs, say 3 degrees. I don't think there's any reason to go more than 3 degrees. So this aspect between the sun and Jupiter, it started to come in probably Monday, Tuesday, and it's going to be with us until until the weekend, maybe the end of the weekend. So it's not just a one-day wonder. This whole sort of last part of the week, we're going to be feeling this. I think probably the whole week, and things are getting larger. Things are perhaps getting exaggerated, and that is a way in which you can see Jupiter. And the Sun trine Jupiter. You might think that it's a fortunate aspect, but don't forget that Jupiter can be connected with death, and it's so often said that Jupiter makes its influence felt at the point of death. I'm not saying anyone's going to die with Sun trine Jupiter, but it can happen. And Sun trine Jupiter, well, it's about a release. It's about moving from one stage to another. Maybe it's not physical death. It's maybe the death of something. Something is coming to an end, and that could be what this Sun trine Jupiter is about. Now, one thing about this particular Sun trine Jupiter is it's on the Aries point. Well, it's aspecting the Aries point. So Sun is at 15.9, 15.8 Pisces. Jupiter's at 15.8 Cancer. The midpoint between the two is at 15.8 Taurus, and 15.8 Taurus is exactly 45 degrees from the Aries point. So Aries, Aries is the global point. Sun, Jupiter, something is being released. The Aries point represents the world, and it's also a reflection on the Aries point. So, okay, if you want to use the Aries point, the solstice point, whatever. So let's just show you what I mean. So here is here is the solstice point, 0 degrees Cancer. So if we reflect Jupiter in the solstice point, we get to 15 degrees Gemini, and you can see that the sun is square that reflection. Likewise, if we reflect the sun in the solstice point, we get to 15 degrees Libra, which is square Jupiter. So the sun and Jupiter are really bouncing off the Aries point, and we should not forget that we are in the middle of several wars, with particular emphasis on this war in Iran. And so when you have got a war which has just been going on for the last, which has only just started, and you've got Sun trine Jupiter on the Aries point, what, you're going to be thinking about peace? Well, you can have peace with Sun trine Jupiter. I'll show you. I'll give you an example in a moment. You can, but I don't think we're at the stage in this war where there's suddenly everyone's going to sort of stop fighting. I don't think so. And so you could see Sun trine Jupiter as being something really quite dramatic. Normally I wouldn't say that, but when you've got a war going on, what is going to happen? And it doesn't have to be exact. It can be a few days before, Could be a few days after. It may then just be that the Sun trine Jupiter is just telling us what's going on. We already know. You don't need astrology. Maybe the Sun trine Jupiter is about the unfolding of this war, but maybe there'll be things going on when this aspect is exact, which is today, Thursday, which really is a sort of a Sun-Jupiter event. So what I thought I'd do to finish is just look at some examples of what happened when Sun was trine Jupiter. I'm not looking at people with Sun trine Jupiter. I want to look at sort of a few events. So talking about peace, we had the armistice, or when the First World War ended, the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, the 11th of November 1918. And so at the time of the armistice, there's Jupiter exactly trine Venus. I mean, Jupiter trine Venus, the two benefics in exact trine. That sort of fits the idea of peace, a conflict coming to an end, and also the Sun making a trine to Jupiter. So you could say that the armistice, the end of the First World War, was Sun trine Jupiter at its most positive, at its most constructive, and that's kind of fits with the idea that Sun trine Jupiter is a fortunate aspect. At that time, it was easy to find peace. So another example of something finally coming to an end, something being resolved, was the date in which I think Diana and Charles officially became divorced. I think it was August the 28th, 1996, which was actually sort of just a year before, pretty much exactly a year before she was killed. And so the Sun is at 5 degrees Virgo, Jupiter at 7 degrees Capricorn. A very earthy trine. You can think that there was money and involved, and it was very much set out as a sort of a legal event, but still something got resolved, and that may be a way in which we can see a Sun trine Jupiter. And England, well, at least the 1066 England chart. I mean, I do use the 1066 England chart as the chart. I mean, I know there are other charts, but I seem to be attached to the 1066 chart. So here is the 1066 chart. I know it says December the 31st, but that's just December the 25th converted to the Gregorian calendar. So England has, or Britain arguably, has Sun trine Jupiter. It's got the Sun in Capricorn, trine Jupiter in Sun trine Jupiter in Virgo. That may say something about Britain at its best, being quite sensible and reserved. Sun in Capricorn, trine Jupiter in Virgo. It's not very fiery, is it? We concentrate on what matters. We don't get hysterical, and so maybe that is a sign of a good start. When William the Conqueror was crowned King of England on December the 25th, 1066. Interestingly, Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the Conservative Party, she was born. If you converted Kemi Badenoch's chart to the Julian calendar, I think Kemi Badenoch was born around December the 25th. I mean, she was born on January the 2nd, but if you convert it to the Gregorian calendar, she's pretty close to Christmas Day. If you convert it to the Julian calendar. And Kemi Badenoch also has the Sun-Jupiter trine. And so, with Kemi Badenoch, I mean, I've said this before, but, something puzzles me. Puzzles me about it. I mean, this may not be of any interest to you if you're not from the UK, but everyone says, how useless she is. Okay, but it hasn't been so bad. I mean, because her performance in the House of Commons has been improving in the last few months. She made a conference speech in the autumn, which went down very well. But people really see her as going nowhere. The Conservatives are doing really badly in the polls. It just doesn't. It seems hopeless. But I'm just so unconvinced by this. Maybe I'm not. Maybe if I was in Britain, I would really understand the truth of how apparently useless she is. But I just don't entirely buy it. And Kemi Badenoch, she is a Capricorn, and she just keeps going. And yeah, she keeps losing people. People keep defecting to reform, and her standing in the polls goes from bad to, well, okay, it's kind of flatlined a bit now, and she just lost. The Conservatives, the Gorton and Denton by-election, did horribly. They just got a few hundred. They got less than 1,000 votes, and they lost their deposit. But still, Kemi Badenoch's horoscope and the 1066 horoscope both have Sun trine Jupiter, both pretty much born on the same day, at least converted to the Julian calendar. And I just keep saying, I don't write Kemi Badenoch off. I just feel that you shouldn't. She is a Capricorn, and she's still learning. I mean, she's a relatively young woman. I mean, she's in her 40s. She can still learn. I think she has learned to some extent. But I thought I had to say that. Don't give up on her, even though it might sound completely crazy to think that there's any possibility of her becoming prime minister. But I just don't think the chances are quite as low as one thinks. Although I don't have a time of birth for her, and I haven't got a decent horary in terms of her political career. But anyway, I think that's something we need to keep thinking about if we are interested in British politics. And someone in the news who stays in the news is Epstein. And Epstein's death. We talked about the Sun trine Jupiter and Epstein. And yeah, Epstein. This is Epstein's death. Epstein died when the Sun was at 17 Leo. So, yeah, and Jupiter was at 14 Sagittarius. So there was a Sun-Jupiter trine. In fact, there was quite a big trine going on. There was a Sun-Venus conjunction at the time of his death, and the Moon had made the trine to the two. But yeah, we did have a Sun-Jupiter trine at the time of his death, and that gives us, firstly, the idea that Jupiter can be about release, and it also says we shouldn't get too hung up about exact orbs. I mean, this is what Sun and Jupiter are about, 3 degrees apart, but perhaps it was a release for Epstein. Maybe it's a chart of his escape. I don't know. I mean, I assume he's dead. Of course, some people say he managed to escape, in which case Sun trine Jupiter is him sort of managing to get out of prison. So Jupiter expands, Jupiter enlarges, and the enlargement of the European Union on May the 1st, 2004. So a lot of countries, I mean, Slovakia, Hungary, Poland entered the European Union. I think there were some others. Was it Slovenia? Did that enter on May the 1st, 2004? I was in Slovakia on May the 1st, so I kind of remember all the European flags. All this, everyone was full of optimism. I wasn't as Eurosceptic as I am now, so it seemed exciting. And this happened when the Sun was at 10 degrees Taurus and Jupiter was at 8 degrees Virgo, so in Earth signs. So a very practical, sensible thing to do. Of course, Czech Republic, that was another country that entered. So that's Sun-Jupiter. And that just can be a way in which Sun-Jupiter can work, something getting bigger, something enlarging. And Sun-Jupiter trine can also be about bad things happening. It can be, for example, about an earthquake. There was a big earthquake in Morocco a few days ago. Years ago, 2023. And there you have a fairly close Sun-Jupiter trine within half a degree. You also had Uranus on the ascendant. I mean, I did look at that. I did do a video about that quite a few years ago when it happened. So you know, that's a possible manifestation of sun and Sun Jupiter. Notre Dame fire. The Notre Dame fire was, of course, a huge event, a negative event. This is a chart of a Notre Dame fire. A Sun in a fire sign. As one would expect, Jupiter in a fire sign. Yeah, there was a Sun Jupiter trine, and Hamas. Hamas was, I believe, founded at the end of 1987 on December the 4th, December the 14th. So again, Sun Jupiter trine. You know, this Jupiter here, don't forget, Jupiter is very much about, or can be about, ideology, one's beliefs, what is important ideologically. So Sun Jupiter trine marked the beginning of Hamas. And finally, a military operation, the start of Operation Uranus, when the Soviet Union, the Soviet armies surrounded Stalingrad on November the 19th, 1942. And so there is Sun in Scorpio trine Jupiter in Cancer. So there's Sun in Jupiter. Sun Jupiter, perhaps that's a mark of a successful military operation, something to think about when we have got wars going on, including one war involving Russia, like with Operation Uranus, not to mention the war in the Middle East. So anyway, that's it. That's all I've got to say about Sun trine Jupiter. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description. And I will talk to you again tomorrow.